Path podcast. It's where we discuss the paths of being an entrepreneur and why people feel the pull to go in one direction or the other. My name is Craig Brower. My co-host here, John Brandt. John has been a successful entrepreneur for half of your life, the last 30 years or so.
Yeah.
Multiple businesses sold, created. And you've just provided me with tons of information over the last 15 years since we've really known each other, or more actually.
Yeah.
And you recently approached me about sharing your knowledge, or more your wisdom, than anything. And that was really the catalyst of this podcast. I think really the best way to start this first initial intro episode is for you to introduce yourself and kind of give us a little bit of background about your successes.
Sure. It's kind of interesting. I love this whole concept of being able to share my background and so forth. And my experiences. I've built 4 companies. Literally 3 of them. Solo founder of the companies and built them and sold them. The 4th, I came in and invested in the company, helped grow it, and we exited recently as well. So, I got 4 successes behind me. I'm on my 5th. Just turned 60, and I'm on my 5th. I guess I'm a glutton for punishment. I'm my 6th company, and we're in the middle of actually selling that company as well. Knock on wood. We'll see how that goes.
Right.
But ultimately, the concept around the podcasts is really kind of telling my story, helping people really understand what it's all about being an entrepreneur. And for me, it was an awakening. I had to learn some new habits about myself and learn and understand about who I was before I can actually create something.
Right.
And it took, a number of failures first. I talk about my successes first, but I need to underline that I went through a number of failures, as you know, Craig. And meeting you with one of my first successes was really cool when I met you. Well, that was 15 years ago when we sold the company, but I met you probably almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's, really cool to see what you've been doing, and you've taken the hidden path as well.
Right.
There's always a mission behind it. So for me, it's about really helping people create businesses, find the passion in it, and growing it.
Right.
And then eventually living the American dream and selling the business, if that's your goal.
Now, we discussed this for a little bit as far as coming up with the name of the podcast and so forth. And it was really based off of something that was very important in your life, which was a book that you found, back in the 80s, or it was written in the 80s, but you found in the early 90s, right?
Early 90s.
Yeah. And if you can talk a little bit about that, because I think that's a very important part.
Sure. I'm sure people are familiar with The Road Less Taken, which was the Robert Frost poem. And then there was, I took the road less traveled, and that made all the difference in my life. And it really did. And I guess I don't recall how I got the book or who gave me the book. It's funny. I've been trying to think about this, but it changed my life. I was going through a number of, business failures that were kind of repetitive. Businesses would skyrocket up and then kind of dovetail. A lot of it was because there were certain skills that I didn't have, but it was also a mindset and really kind of thinking about what I wanted to build and what it was all about. Sometimes when you think about growing up, I just want to be my own boss, I want to build the company. But for me, it was more of a mission to try to figure out, number one, what am I doing wrong? And maybe there's a better way to look at life. So I picked up a book called The Road Less Traveled. It was written by M. Scott Peck in the 80s. That's correct. And the book actually didn't reach fame until it was written in the early 80s. And literally, I think he went on Oprah and talked about his book back in the late 80s, where it got So he created something that really wasn't successful until he got this huge following after. And for me, somebody gave me the book, or I found it somewhere, and I opened the first page. Wasn't really interested. I had so many books. I was so trying to figure it all out. You know, what's going on? What's my pattern here? Why am I building a business going like this? And then it's dovetailing, and I wake up the next morning, I'm out of business. So for me, it was the first paragraph of the book that kind of made me sit back. I didn't know what to think of it, and I kind of repeated the quote, or the first paragraph said, "Life is difficult." And he wrote, "This is a great truth, one of the greatest truths, because once we truly see this truth, we transcend it. Once we truly know that life is difficult, once we truly understand and accept it, then life is no longer difficult. Because once it's accepted, the fact that life is difficult no longer matters." And so I stood there with a big question mark on my head, like, what the hell did I just read?
Right, yeah. That doesn't sound like your typical business book.
Right.
You know?
And or never tell, you know, I was used to looking at books that were telling me good stories, you know, be positive, get up, go do that. But what I saw here was kind of a stoic, I didn't know at the time, a stoic philosophy about how to live your life. And you know, when he talks about once it's truly accepted, it becomes easy. I didn't understand that premise. Now, you know, after reading it multiple times, I understood the premise after reading the book. But the premise really is about once you accept the fact that, you know what, the road's not going to be easy ahead. Once you accept it and you're comfortable with that feeling to be uncomfortable, there's a paradox that happens. And the paradox is that you actually embrace this difficulty that you have to deal with. You don't have to love it, but you embrace it.
Right.
You take it in, and you know, if I'm going down this hidden path, things are dark, things aren't exactly, they're ambiguous. There's twists and turns. There's a lot of things, but once you accept it and move forward, things become easier. And that was kind of a unlocking of a key in my life at probably 30 years old. I'm 60 now. It's almost exactly 30 years ago. I still read that book every year from front to back.
So 30 times you're on.
Probably the first year I probably read it like 30 times on its own. And probably a few in the beginning, probably 3-4 times a year.
Right.
Yeah, I'm probably into 40-45 reads of the same book.
Wow.
So it really became something special to me and made me look at life. And part of this podcast will be me kind of talking about that, reverting back to that, because I want people to understand that, you know, in spite of everything, in spite of the difficulty, in spite of the way the world is, there is sun, and the sun's gonna come out, and you gotta weather the storm. And through our lives, we have beautiful weather, then we have storms. Isn't that the way we should have our own lives? Is that there's not every day is going to be sweet and great, but if you embrace that, hey, you know what? Things will be better tomorrow. Things will be better next week. Things will be better in 6 months. Whatever it is, you can deal with everything. So that's my kind of concept around the book.
So understanding that life's going to throw you curveballs.
Yeah.
And realizing, hey, look, this is going to happen.
Yeah.
Those are things that you learn as far as lessons. You know, those are the things that you can look at and say, this is just part of the growing process. There's something more that's being asked of me. With something that's being more asked of me, things are going to become more difficult in my life. So I would have to assume, and also I kind of know this from just talking to you, that especially knowing now that you've read the book maybe over 40 times, there's some significant lessons that you've learned from not only that book, but the concepts behind the book and moving forward.
Right. Because the book doesn't solve all your problems.
Right.
The the realization of what you read and then going out and testing it and doing it is what saves your, what really changes your life. But through there, I learned some interesting things. I learned disciplining myself, to really kind of look at things and embrace things that I wasn't doing before. I knew I was in a pattern, and I kept asking the question, like, how do I get out of this pattern? What's and it wasn't only the book, it was also relationships I had. My wife's family was in a business, and they were very consistent in what they did. And I wanted that consistency. There was one thing about me. I was wildly, great at the start, but I just didn't finish well. So I would create a business and it would take off, and then somewhere it got boring or whatever, and it just kind of crashed. And I was creating this pattern. So yeah, The Road Less Traveled is not a business book. It's a book about psychology.
Right.
Actually, M. Scott Peck's a psychiatrist, but applied to the way we live our lives, probably more to me, it was more impactful than any business book I read.
Sure.
It made me start thinking about, this is the way. So it wasn't meant to be, hey, this is for entrepreneurs. But I've been able to take that into my path and go, wow, I embrace this concept of, life is difficult. There are certain things. There's discipline. There's courage. There's all these things that you gotta push forward. And if you don't, you don't get the success behind it.
Do you think that perhaps when you read that initial paragraph in that book, do you think that maybe it hit you in that point where you were like, you know what, I'm not the only one who is experiencing this, where maybe you felt a little bit more alone in the beginning, and then you read that and you said, oh, wait a second, there's other people out here that, this book was written for. This book was written for me in a way. You looked at it as like, hey, this is the perfect thing for me to learn.
Yeah.
But did it also help you realize that, okay, I'm not the only one that's dealing with these struggles or these ups or these downs, and knowing that allowed you to accept those things a little bit easier, and then start to kind of develop your own changes in your own life, and then expand that into your business and into your, whatever relationships and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, it totally helped me bring it into my life and actually make it a part of my life, not just my business life. That was my biggest issue, was dealing with the failures and all the things. So of course that was top of my mind at the time, but it was also my relationships. I was married for my first marriage, I was married for a very short period of time, and I'd gone through a divorce. So not feeling great about myself, dealing with a failed business. It was all these things that were going around and around. My relationship with family, so I took it as, hey, I got to get my mind right.
Right.
I didn't necessarily know that. I didn't pick up the book thinking to solve anything. But when I read that paragraph, it just like stopped me in my tracks. I go, I don't fully understand this, but I think I like it.
Yeah. And then, and you've picked up pieces from that book and brought them into your life, like you just said, and you've learned some valuable lessons from it.
Yeah.
That you've implemented in a variety of different ways.
Yeah.
What are some of those lessons that you've picked up? And
well, for business, there were a number of things, and so my background. So I talked about my success in business. I'm also a partner in a venture capital firm, and I listen to early stage companies raising money. I look at their mindset of the entrepreneur. So we're much like a Shark Tank. We listen to multiple companies that are pitching, whether it's weekly, monthly. And it's interesting. I built a company bootstrapped, and now the world has changed. Just, so I get the idea, investing and so forth, and we've had success. But on the business front, there are a number of things. I call them embraces and things not to embrace. So the first one we could talk about is, so this kind of starts from the quote in the book, right? So it's embrace ambiguity. Embrace that things are going to look ambiguous. That all the greatest ideas started with there was an ambiguous outcome. So when you look at that, you think about that, embracing that, you know what? I know I'm moving forward. I don't know exactly how things are going to turn out. We talk about pivoting. Mm-hmm. Those are part of it, right? Maneuvering our way down the path.
Sure.
So that's the first one, embracing ambiguity, embracing that things look ambiguous.
They're
sometimes.
They're murky.
Murky.
You just have to kind of get your way through it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a better word, actually. Murky, right. You just don't know where it's going, but it's going. Mm-hmm. Especially, there is a sense of that as being an entrepreneur. You have to sense you're going into the unknown. The first thing that comes to my mind is Tom Hanks in Castaway when he gets on that raft that he builds, right? And he gets on the raft, and the raft's starting to float out. I think Wilson was still with him at that time.
Yeah.
Tied to the boat. But when he goes out, he keeps looking back at the shore, and there's almost a safety net there. Like, I could just go back, go back to the where I was. Mm-hmm. I was living a lonely but decent life. I'm alive.
Right.
So he got on the boat or the raft, the makeshift, and he started to go out to sea. And then there was that one scene when he looks back at at land, and it no longer is there.
Right.
It just becomes horizon. All he sees is water.
Right.
And for me, that's a telltale sign of that ambiguous outcome.
Well, what's interesting,
but he's moving out.
Right. Well, what's interesting about that too is if you think about that movie, and no spoilers, but that's the second time that he tried doing it. The first time he was very unprepared.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have, even if he would have gotten past
fell
that
apart.
That was it.
Back and had to swim back. And
those are those lessons that you learn that may look like there's no solution.
Yeah. Excellent point.
But if you keep the focus or the goal of one day I want to get off of this island, those things will reveal themselves and so forth.
Yeah. And again, so the first one is embracing ambiguity. Number 2 is embracing scaling. So let me talk about that. Some of you know what scaling is. You know what scaling is. I do. It's really kind of the concept of creating the systems in your business to be able to grow it, which I'm not saying don't embrace that. But when you're an early stage startup, embrace making money. Embrace, taking your business to some type of traction before you start scaling out the business. I see way too many people going, well, I'm going to start the business and we're going to do this, and this. That never happens. The majority of the time, you start pivoting and you start doing all different things. Give yourself that sense of being able to. When I started almost every one of my businesses, the latter, the most recent businesses were actually, based around that principle. Like, we're going to just do what we can do. We're going to service our clients. We're going to do whatever we can, even if we don't see that we could scale it. Mm. And you know what happens once you build a business and you have things running, you could look back and you could start going, okay, now I can scale this. So don't embrace. Everybody pushes this, and to me, it's really not something. It's not even negotiable. You need to create a business that starts traction. Most of traction means sales. So start making money and then figure out how to scale it. When you get to a certain point, we could talk details at another point in the podcast about how to get from A to B, which is figuring out how to scale.
Right.
But early stage, build a business that you can focus on to make dollars.
And you've spoken to a lot as an investor and with the fund and all that. You've spoken to probably many different businesses. I don't know how many. Maybe you have a better number of that. How many of those do you find that are they come in, they're looking for funding, they're looking for, for you to invest, and you realize right away you're on the wrong side of it, and you're trying to do the wrong thing first. You need to get this figured out first, and then
and that's the point. The other one, the third one is don't embrace failure. So number one, embrace ambiguity. Two, don't embrace scaling. And three, don't embrace failure. Don't embrace failure. The point about not embracing failure is very simple. Accept it, deal with it, but you don't have to like it. And I hear a lot of these gurus out there going, I love failure. Failure is the best thing. I get what they're trying to say, but let's step back. Failure is no fun. But once you embrace failure once you don't embrace failure, you don't love it, you don't accept it, you get out of it quicker. So you're going to have it, you're going to deal with it, but you're going to get out of it quicker because you don't have to like it.
So it goes back to kind of the quote from the beginning of the book in a way. You can kind of almost change some of those words to failure as opposed to, things are going to happen.
Right.
Failure is going to happen.
Accept that it's going to happen, but don't accept the you don't have to be friends with failure.
Right.
I look back, I have no regrets in the failure I've had, but man, they hurt at the time.
Sure.
Every one of them hurt, waking up and not having any money to pay my rent, was a good wake up call to go, if I embrace this, I'm just going to be living. I'm going to be living in this failure soup.
Right.
And I think for a while, prior to the reading Road Less Travel, I think for a while I was like, okay, failure, it's okay. I can get through it. It's not that bad. And I wallowed in it a little bit, probably a little too long before I need to get out of it.
Like you said, there's a lot of people that sit there and embrace failure, or, if you're failing, it shows that you're trying.
Yeah, it does. It certainly does, but you just don't have to love it.
Right. What's the, what do you find is a good way to realize, okay, this is a part of the process. I have to understand this is a part of but how do you not, what was it that for you that, like you said, you wallowed in it for a little bit? When was it, or how was it figured out by you to be like, you know what? Yeah, I got to stop this. I got to stop sitting in this muck and get out of it and understand that I've learned lessons. I just need to make sure that I don't do them again.
Yeah. And I think, part of the failure thing is kind of making a pact with yourself that you're not going to make the same failure or mistake. Right. So that to me is another piece of this thing is, not embracing failure, not embracing making the same mistake over and over again. I've made thousands of mistakes in my life, but I don't believe, except for early on, I don't believe from the age of 30 to now, which is 30 years, I don't believe I've made the same mistake twice. I've never stepped on the same nail in my foot.
Right.
And I've never did the same thing over again. But I've failed, and I continue to fail. And I know it's if I'm going to raise myself to a higher level, whether that's a higher level as a human being, growing a business, or just being a stoic person, I have to realize that failure is basically like it's going to rain this week. Failure exists.
Right.
It's never not going to exist. So again, don't embracing failure is a big part of it. And what I mean by that is don't wallow and don't love it.
Right. Realize it's there as kind of this silent partner that works alongside you to teach you lessons. What else is there from
it's a sucky partner that lives by you.
Right.
The other is, and again, I don't want to sound Pollyannish, but embrace your passion for your business. So let me kind of go through that. You need to create something, a business that has a story to it and has a good story. I'll give you my story for NHA, National Health Career Association, that I created. We created certification in the healthcare space. We were a for-profit certifying agency, the first of its kind. But what was interesting about developing NHA and then eventually selling it was the story that I stumbled upon that happened, but I stumbled upon telling the story. I didn't realize it was as impactful as it really was. And then now I realize that, true life really does dictate where you go in life. So my true life story was that, this was a story of my grandmother that was in the hospital. I went to go see her. She had a huge black and blue mark on her arm. She was near the end of her life, but she was, coherent. And I went to her in the hospital. I remember it was in Florida, and she had this big, huge black and blue mark from like her wrist all the way up to just about her shoulder, little lower than her shoulder. And I said, I felt warm to the touch. I went to the nurse. I know nothing. I've never been in the healthcare industry. Knew nothing. Didn't even think I would end up there. And I went over to a nurse, and I said to the nurse, my grandmother's arm. She said, "Oh, that's fine. She's fine." We checked her. There was a phlebotomist. Somebody called the phlebotomist that came into the room and went to draw her blood. And she missed your grandmother's vein, and this is leakage, but she's going to be fine. And I said, okay, I accepted it. I thought, wow, phlebotomist. It sounds like a really important position.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't remember exactly what I was thinking, but I felt pretty satisfied. I got in the elevator, and as the door was closing, it probably changed my life. If I ever found this woman now, I'd give her a big hug and a kiss. She got into the elevator, and it was another nurse that overheard me asking. She said, "I have to tell you, that person that drew your grandmother's blood last night worked in the cafeteria the day before." She was a cafeteria worker. We were short-staffed on the floor. We needed a phlebotomist. Somebody quit, whatever, and we trained her to draw blood from an orange. And then your grandmother was her first, and she called it victim. And it flipped me out. I stopped. I thought about it, and I just couldn't get the idea, let it go. And I, at that point, came up with I guess I call it an entrepreneurial seizure. I said, why can't I change the healthcare industry? I started there was no internet back then, right? So I went to the library. And I did my search on what job titles in the healthcare world that had certification or didn't offer training and certification. And I really looked at about 4 or 5 different areas. The first one I started with was phlebotomy, but then medical assistants and people that do your EKG, medical billers and coders. There was no actual certification test or actually a formalized training program for them. So to make this story quicker, is I basically took this, brought in the right people, and taught me and learned what the concept was to actually create training and certification for these type of healthcare professionals.
Right.
And that's how it kind of came together.
Yeah, no, story is, I'm a hobby writer, and I've written a tremendous amount of content over my, the last 10, 12 years of my life and so forth. But story plays such an important part. And I think you brought up a good point that it was never the intention to share that story. But as time went on and you would tell that, it became where people listened to it, it was something that they could relate to in a certain way. They couldn't believe. It was almost like exposing this whole situation. That's like, wow, this is incredible. First of all, I never even knew that you didn't need a license. I always thought that was somebody that went to college and things like that. So, story is vital when it comes down to it. And like when you say having a passion for the business, and I know you've also talked about a purpose for the business, that became not only a passion, but there was a purpose behind that as well. And the story really helps to bring that purpose home.
Yeah.
So would you say that if you're a small business or you're starting a side hustle or whatever it might be, is to figure out, is this just a money grab, or is this something that I could build a business behind with purpose, with passion, with, that would have, a story.
Yeah.
When
those things connected, when I thought, okay, I'm going to build this business, because I think there's a huge need here. There's a need for patient protection. I learned what I learned was, in that particular business. And by the way, that was my biggest one I built and sold. That was probably my biggest win I ever had. But what was interesting about that business was that I started understanding that we were creating safety procedures when it came to drawing blood. We'll use that as an example where this was when HIV and hepatitis was really strong. People were catching that in the hospitals through blood draws, and needles stick that would by accident stick someone, or you're doing it slop. So we created the safety process in the blood draw process that that enhanced it to be safer. Two things what it did. Actually, that business created three different areas of purpose. One was embracing hospital workers and giving them safety so they don't injure themselves. God forbid they're drawing blood from someone with hepatitis or HIV, and they, by accident, using the safety procedures, wearing the gloves, all these things came into play to help the healthcare worker. And then you can go right there and go, now we're also saving the patient. Mm-hmm. A story that happened to my grandmother. By the way, my grandmother, I didn't even finish that story, but it ended up becoming an infection. We did fight it. Was lucky it didn't turn into MRSA. But MRSA is an infection that goes on in the hospital, mostly from a failed practice, whether something was a piece of equipment wasn't exposed or was exposed to something and someone caught a virus or a bacterial infection.
Right.
So those are things that happen. Then the third was we were working with schools across the country, career education schools that would use this to help students go through training. So we created the training for these particular people and the certification. So we literally help people get jobs. Mm-hmm. This was, a lot of people that were taking these programs were inner city. Some of them were on welfare and so forth. And we were able to convert them to actually go out and create a career for themselves, which was, again, another fulfilling thing. So I built a business that fulfilled three different things that I knew that we were doing every day. And that was like the coolest thing for me.
Yeah. And that those things were not evident in the beginning when it started. It was just, hey, this was a situation that there's got to be something here to protect people like my grandmother. Right. And then it ended up becoming learning more about all the other ways of it. So that was that murkiness that maybe you didn't even realize that you were trudging through, in the beginning, that revealed themselves as time went on.
Yep, absolutely. And that did it for me. As far as, once I was able to tell that story, I think I was at a conference and sitting around with a few people, and I told the story, and they're like, wow, that, a truthful, amazing story.
Yeah.
That's how you found your business. Like, wow, what a weird way to go.
Right.
I've been an outsider in almost every industry, but in a weird way, I've been someone who has been that have experienced that world. So whether it was my grandmother or my mom who ended up passing away from Alzheimer's, whatever, it's, we all live in that world. More recently, company we just sold 3 years ago, and a company I'm involved in now is in the behavioral health world. And that was, again, huge purpose for me. I lost my brother years ago to suicide. And when I was, looking at the next direction I wanted to go, I just was able to reach into my passion and go, I want to be in the behavioral health world, and I want to work with kids. I want to create a business that works with young kids that are going through anxiety, depression, all of these areas. And I want to be able to tell that story of my brother who I was super close to, who took his own life through being depressed, and why that should never have happened.
Right.
You know, but you live and learn.
Right.
But those are areas of why you need to have some kind of passion.
Sure. Right.
And if you can't find a passion, if you're selling widgets, find a passion for your employees. Find something you could do for your employees, or find, really reach deep to be able to tell the story and have a purpose for what you're doing. It's really, I call myself a purpose-based entrepreneur because that's where I like to be. That's where I want to be able to help and build something that's based around that. Yes, I want the American dream. I want to build a company. I want to sell a company, but I want to do right by what I create, what I sell.
Right, right.
And I want it to have a legacy, and that's, all my businesses have been legacies that I can look at.
And you also, you've mentioned this too before, and I believe that this is also one of those things that you hold very close to your philosophy and your wisdom is figuring out those things, is spending time to understand, that part of the process, or those things that you might be struggling with or trying to figure out, and focusing on yourself to learn that. That's a big part of it.
Yeah, that's actually leads to number 5, right? So my 5th one, again, kind of going through it. One is embrace ambiguity, embracing scale. Don't embrace scaling. Don't embrace failure. Embrace passion for your business and purpose. And then last one is really embracing focus time for yourself. Embracing, and I learned that one in the middle of that changed the trajectory of that business, NHA. I was in the middle of when I started the business, things started happening, but I knew I was dealing with changes and I wanted to grow the business. I wasn't as focused as I wanted to be, and I kept kind of beating myself up on it. And I decided, and I'll tell you a great story. We were $500,000 in the hole. My wife was working with me, and I said to her, I need to figure this out. I don't know whether I should go get a job and quit this thing. I had this idea, but it wasn't really working. And I had 2 businesses going on. I had a career education school that was training people in that world. And I had my certification company that was really kind of my big idea, but it was very small at the time. Mm-hmm. And I had to make a decision to get out of one business and go into the other. And for me, I decided I'm going to take a 2-day focused time on myself. I told my wife I'm spending it in the office. I don't know if she believed me or not, but it's true. And I spent the weekend basically in my office, sleeping on the couch and really kind of figuring out the next step. And I promised myself I wouldn't leave there. So I started on a Saturday morning and didn't leave till Sunday evening. Mm-hmm. And I promised myself I'm not leaving until I have a plan of action and what I'm going to do. And I focused, we talk about, the power of, the manifestation of attraction. I put it out there that I'm going to sell this one business and literally take the receivables and pay down my bills. And then I'm going to embrace, really push hard on the other business, which was the certification business, which actually turned into the win for me.
Right.
And once I did that, once I actually put it down as a goal, within 3 months, I was able to figure out how to sell that business, which the one business really wasn't sellable at the time, but I actually sold it and made money and used those funds to be able to generate. So I went from literally $500,000 in debt to roughly 12 months later. I remember it was December to December in over $1 million in the profit zone. So that was wild that I actually did that. And then I started taking on the practice that I'm going to meet with myself on a weekly basis and just have some focus time, even if it's 15 minutes, literally 15 minutes can make the difference in your life.
Right.
Whether that's figuring out where vertically to grow your business or how do I focus deeper into the things I'm doing. So number 5 is embracing focus time for yourself. We can go into detail on that one because in the future, because that's a big one.
Right.
Yeah. It's like setting a clock and going, I'm putting 15 minutes. 15 minutes a week could change your whole trajectory where you're going.
So, taking a step back to what you just said, you were $400,000 or $500,000 in the hole, more or less, trying to figure out how am I going to get out of this idea, this purpose driven company that I'm trying to build is in its infancy, more or less.
Yeah.
We're struggling financially, and you knew that there was a bigger picture. You understood that. You saw it. You talked to people. The money that you owed. I don't know if that was through one thing or if it was through multiple things. Did you find that once you sat in that room for those 2 days, that you also had to make some hard decisions that you were maybe thinking to yourself, like, man, I'm going to have to force myself to go and talk to some of these people and how important is that too, as an entrepreneur, to sit there and make those hard choices, realizing, okay, these things are going to happen, but now I actually have to face them head on and I actually have to do something about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's exactly what I did. I actually literally picked up the phone and talked to all the creditors we owed money to and so forth and didn't back away. My first choice could have been, hey, file for bankruptcy, go get a job. I didn't know who would hire me. I don't think I had the skills. That's another thing. Right. I was against the wall. I wasn't necessarily interested in going to work for someone. But it does require the difficulty of having a conversation with people that you owe money to. But the beauty was that I was able to whether it was set up payment plans with some of them, or just literally, make it work. But I was able to sit with them and go through that. Yeah, that was difficult. And it was a little bit of suffering. And I when I think about suffering and pain are inevitable when it comes to living life, right? Because the difficult, right? The paragraph about life is difficult, but business is difficult. And if you're building a successful company, you'll be called upon to suffer more. It's just as simple as that. Understand that, embrace, and really kind of take that in, and really, have that as part of your existence. That suffering is inevitable, and understand that your business will grow. And that's, to me, is another part of it. So facing the music, part of the road less traveled was dealing with problems and issues head on, not burying your head. I spent a majority of my life up to that time, and I didn't know it was wrong. I just thought, like, oh, I don't want to, it's raining out today. I'm going under the bed,
Right.
That really is a wake-up call to understand that, you know what? We're here to solve problems. We're not here to live on a raft and float around enjoying with the sun shining on us, laying in our backyard pool.
Right.
Those are great things. You do those after. You do it after you've done the difficult things, because part of life is enjoying things as well. But don't expect that to be part of our lives daily. Sure. We're not meant to be these little, comfort, warm, fuzzy people. And it's all about, living a warm, fuzzy life. You got to dig deep. And when you dig deep, you can live the warm, fuzzy life later.
Right.
But you got to pay the piper early, and that's important.
Do you see that being an issue too when companies are coming in to pitch you on certain things too? Can you look at that and say, okay, you haven't gone through the crap yet. You haven't gone through all these different pieces. You don't have mindset and belief, I think, is a huge part. And I think you agree with me that mindset and belief is a huge part of being an entrepreneur and going that other path, the path that most people will not go down, where the majority of other people are telling you, no, follow this path, follow this path.
Right.
You know,
Go to college, get a job.
with your wisdom and your beliefs and so forth, what do you think is the biggest reason, or one of the biggest reasons, that people just suggest that over, hey, you should become an entrepreneur? Because I know, even like you had mentioned with your daughter, she had to recently make a significant change with some things, and it was hard for you to not tell her to go one way or the other. You know, myself too, as a father, what do you think is the reason that most people just say, hey, just do this?
Well, I think that, okay, here's my philosophy about this. I think that people want best for you that's best for themselves. And let me kind of explain that. You want the best for your, let's say, your daughter. My daughter. So a good example is my daughter left a high-paying career and wanted to start her own thing, which I'm so proud of her. But my first reaction to that was, why would you leave? Things are good. You know, things are coming together. She had some issues with a boss. I get it. But you know, you can get over that. I started really kind of giving the typical response that a parent would do.
Sure.
Because why? I want safety for her. And you know what? It's I don't know if it's selfishness that people are. I don't want to put it that way, but my philosophy is that people want best for you, but at the same time, they want what's best for them. And you know, so there's two competing things here. One is I want best for my daughter, but I what's best for me is that my daughter doesn't have to suffer through starting a company. So my first reaction to her was that. And then I stopped and thought, like, wow, boy, am I like a hypocrite. And she knew, I actually said it to her, and she's like, Dad, I was thinking the same thing. Boy, am I a hypocrite to actually push her to stay when she wants to be an entrepreneur. And I know she's got the skills. She's better than I ever was. Even right now in her startup phase, I'm just super impressed with what she's doing. She's producing. When I talked about, you know, produce your business first, you know, make money first before you're going out and scaling.
Sure.
She's doing that. Most people can learn things. You got to learn it on your own. As much as I'm going to give you guys a lot of feedback through the course of the podcast, ultimately, Craig, you know it. Ultimately, we got to live a lot of these things. But we can have a philosophy about those things that can help change the way we feel, right? The acceptance that, hey, things aren't going to always go right. I'll deal with it. I don't embrace failure, but I'm going to know it's an acceptable thing that's going on.
Sure.
Just like you don't embrace difficult times. So those are all the pieces that you look at, and, you know, you're asking, you know, I think one of the questions I thought you just said was, you know, some people need to go down one path. Yeah. I mean, you know, if you're risk adverse and you can't really, you know, which I think everybody shouldn't be risk averse. I think we're all humans. We have the ability to adapt to tough times. But yeah, there is a course of going, hey, go to college, go get a job. You're in marketing, go work as an intern and get a job. You'll grow in the corporate world. That's fine. There's entrepreneurs. There's so many ways of looking at this. And I don't think I'm just talking to the people that just want to be entrepreneurs and are unique. I want everybody to listen to this because I think it's a lesson to learn about life.
Sure.
Right? That you know, we look at difficult times as like, boy, this is something that's coming up. It's all there. I think adapting to the Stoic philosophy, and Stoic philosophy kind of tells you that, you know, things aren't good forever, things aren't bad forever. Be steady, right? The Marcus Aurelius, and we could believe me, I'd love to talk about that stuff, and we'll dive into that at some point. But you know, those are all pieces of life that we need to learn,
right?
And we have to learn that, you know, things are inevitable. You know, if we want to grow mentally, spiritually, a business, whatever it is, we're gonna need to suffer more. We're gonna be called. If you want to grow spiritually, one of the things M. Scott Peck talks about is you're going to be called upon to suffer in more ways than you've already have.
Right.
And I've done that.
Yeah.
I've been through that, and I'm still going through it.
Right.
And again, I'm not trying to be a masochist here, but you know, those are important.
Yeah. I mean, belief in yourself, belief in a higher purpose, belief in the passion behind what you're trying to do. It really is a mindset thing. How much do you think mindset really plays a part of the success of an entrepreneur? Do you think you can be successful without having the right mindset, or how do you develop the right kind of mindset? Is that just really, I've been through this shit now and I'm starting to understand this more and more.
Yeah.
And like you said, learn from your mistakes, learn from the failures as lessons. But do you think you can be a successful entrepreneur or move away from being an employee, an intrapreneur to an entrepreneur,
right,
without developing your mindset in a certain way?
No. The simple thing is you can have some success, but if you're not embracing the whole mindset thing, and you're not thinking, you know, hey, this too shall pass, or you know, if you don't have that in your mind, and you're like a pinball just bouncing off things, and you have nothing that holds you together, certainly, you know, you may stumble upon success, but I don't think it'll last. And I think that was where I was. I was the pinball. You know, I was bouncing against things. I didn't really have a base that I can work off of. It was more of to me, it was more of a, you know, just survive mode. So I think if you don't have the proper mindset and you don't have the proper view on things, you just, you'll exist, but you're not going to exist to your fullest capacity.
So earlier you had mentioned that your wife's family had a business, and you saw the consistency.
Yeah.
That must have been a huge shift for you, realizing, okay, these are probably watching what they're doing with their business and then looking at what you're doing with your other business. That was a big change for you to say, okay, my habits, my beliefs need to change.
Right. And my wife's family was it was a small business that, you know, stayed small, but they were so consistent in what they did. And I looked at the staying power of the company. Wow. I always love anything that has staying power, whether it's an actor or somebody like an Arnold Schwarzenegger that transform themselves into different things in their careers and so forth. I always look up to that. And I think I'm kind of in that same mode. I've got into different businesses. I've built and sold companies. You know, people are just happy. When I first sold my first company, I remember someone saying to me, wow, you know, people only sell one company their whole life. And, you know, it's a great thing. So you got your success early. And I'm like, I don't want to stop here. You know, now I'm proving it five in. I don't want to stop here. I want to keep growing. After this business I'm in now, I want to get into something else I have a passion for. I haven't thought about it yet, but I want to.
Did you, you know, after the acquisition of NHA, was there a time where you thought like, okay, like I'm pretty good right now. I might just relax a little bit and kind of enjoy life, or was it pretty quick that you're like, you know what, I got to get back in on this journey again? Well,
that was a rough one because that was so I had one exit before that, which was actually two exits before it, which were career education schools. One was that one when I was in debt. The other one was, you know, a profitable one, but I owned a school in New Jersey as well. One was out in Massachusetts, the first one that we sold in the late 90s. The other one we sold in 2006. Also didn't keep me as focused, but I had that business going. And when I made that move to sell it, so they were two smaller exits, and I had something to go to. I had this business that I wanted to build, so there wasn't really any downtime. But so when I sold NHA, you're actually correct. My wife pushed me to take some time off. I was burning the candle at multiple ends. I was exhausted, just getting to the finish line of that deal. I sat home for a couple of weeks and then decided I needed to make things happen. I went through some depression because that comment that somebody said to me about my one and only win literally made me feel sad. Made me feel like, oh, is this all that life has to offer?
Right. Have I peaked at this point?
Yeah. And I was 46 years old. And I'm like, no, I have to be. So actually building the Sage brand and the company we sold 3 years ago, the Sage schools, which were behavioral health schools, I was so, wow, I did this for a third time. Fourth time. And that was just amazing to me that like I got to that point. And now with what I'm going through right now and selling this company, this is going to be a really nice win. I don't know how many more I have in me. I'm 60 already, but I plan on continuing to build and teach and work. And part of giving this podcast is really giving back. There's a purpose here too. It's about giving back. I've been through hell and back.
Right. Few times.
And
Yeah.
I know. I could tell you all about hell. Nice place.
Yeah.
But I don't want to live there.
Right.
And it's really damn hot. But but ultimately, those are those were learning experiences. And yes, I went through the take a break, and then I went through the backstory of me suffering and listening to words that people said to me and people that gave me encouragement. More of the people that put me down, I probably learned more from those people. I've learned more from growing up from my dad's mistakes than I learned about my dad's any successful things he's learned that he learned in life. We can get into that at another point, but ultimately, those are all part of the education process.
Yeah,
and being a human, right?
Yeah. Well,
and a business guy.
Yeah. Well, I think I've seen it personally myself. I've seen it with friends that are entrepreneurs or trying to do their own thing. That once they start to, like you said, focus, start to change some of their beliefs, their habits, and things like that, it affects multiple different areas, of your life. So I could see why when the company was sold and everything, that there was a period of time like, should I take a break for a little bit? Should I not? But then I think that you're somebody that always feels the need to want to grow, to become a better, bigger version of yourself. Yeah. Is that an entrepreneurial instinct that entrepreneurs have? I mean, I'm assuming that, obviously regular, your typical, like for instance, my wife, Nicole, she's a school teacher. She tries to grow in certain ways, maybe not as much as an entrepreneur, but she realizes that she doesn't want to stay stagnant.
Right.
So even learning new things, learning new skills, doing things with our YouTube channels and so forth, are pretty significant. But, do you think that as an entrepreneur, like you said, we're called to a higher purpose and we'll experience things in a different way? Do you think that resiliency and that those things play a bigger part in an entrepreneur's life to want to grow bigger and not sit still?
Well, I think we're all like born to learn and be educated right till the time of death. And I've known some people in my life that, have passed away that were, one was an older gentleman that I knew very well who had a lot of success and politically and so forth. And he, always continued to learn. He was, the interesting story about that guy, just briefly, was that he had, he didn't even finish high school. And he was actually, pinned by President Clinton. He worked under the President Clinton administration, and just a great human being that transformed himself from an uneducated kid growing up to this, very successful political. I wouldn't say politician, but he was, he was in the political world. And that to me was very impressive that he was able to grow. So to answer your question, I think we all have the capacity to grow. And I think it's a shame sometimes when people stop growing, when people think that, okay, I'm just going to, ride this out. I'm going to ride life out. I just don't see it. So I don't know if it's just the entrepreneurial thing. Certainly that's, certainly has helped me, but I think as human existence, I think we all have that urge. Whether we do it or not is another question. I've been a doer. I've been able to do it.
Right.
Challenging myself a lot.
So we'll end the episode with this last question. Do you think it's more important to focus on your strengths or to focus on getting better at your weaknesses and understanding what your weaknesses are and working on them, or is it better to work on your strengths as a business owner, as a startup, whatever, successful?
Yeah, I'll talk about it from a business standpoint, right? So from a business standpoint, yes, there's only a few things I'm good at. I only have a few strengths. I could talk about that further in the next episodes, but I only have a few strengths. And those are things I really do focus on. However, I will say when I started my business, and I was the only guy in the office, I had to wear multiple hats. So I had to be at least productive at the things I was weak at. But for the most part, I didn't have to be an expert at those things I was weak at.
Right.
I just had to be able to carry my weight until I can hire someone to pick up one of those. So, think of when you're building a business, you're wearing multiple hats. And I have a great guy, a consultant that I work with, who's still a friend of mine for 20 some odd years, who's done a lot of work with me. He used to have all the hats up on the wall of marketing, tech person, bottle washer,
right,
every job title.
Yeah.
And it used to be when you start your business, you put all those hats on. You're wearing every hat. And then slowly, as you build, you're hiring someone to take those things away. And what are the weaknesses you start taking away? Early on, I knew the first person I needed to hire was someone to help me with the finances. I was not good at that. Mm-hmm. I know my weaknesses. I knew my weaknesses much better than my strengths. Weaknesses were, didn't know finance, and not an operations guy, not a guy that I can work with a key operations person, but from working with me where my strengths were. My strengths were really embracing strategy and kind of that marketing push. And sales I didn't love, but I did it in the beginning until I was able to hand it off. And so those are things. I don't know if I had a weakness in sales, but it wasn't something I enjoyed to do day to day. But ultimately, I had to do them all.
Yeah.
So you got to develop. So to answer your question, you got to develop those weaknesses enough to be able to get through. Unless you have a partner that can handle some of those things. That's a great offset, right? Is to start a business with someone that has, if I had started a business with someone that had operational financial skills, probably would have got to my, success a lot quicker. Mm-hmm. But I had to wait until I was able to, pay those people to come in.
Right. And that kind of also goes back to your scalability. Like you need to understand the
everything first
before you can start to, and then bring those right people in. The guy that does love to do sales, the woman that does love to do sales, or the person that loves to do the financial stuff. Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, look, awesome. Yeah, you take care of this. I'll take care of this, and let's grow this thing together.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's also something that you probably look for a lot too when companies are pitching and trying to get funding is to look at all those pieces and from the knowledge too.
And the last thing with funding is I didn't raise money any of my businesses, so everything's been bootstrapped. But don't look at investors to raise money. Look at investors to sell your success to them. And so when you are on I get it. You want to raise money. But you have to have some traction prior to it. So, don't sell your ideas to sell your successes to them. So when a company gets up in front of us and they have traction and whatever, that means different things for different businesses. But for me, for all intents and purposes, let's say traction really means you got customers and you're making some money. And then you want to go out and raise money. To me, that's where the rubber hits the road. That's where you could go out and raise money when you're showing success.
Right.
There's way too many people out there trying to raise money. Some of them do with ideas. I love the entrepreneur. I have different philosophies from some of the guys in my fund, my partners who look at the concept more than the jockey and horse. Right. Mm-hmm. They look at the They look at the horse, which is the marketplace where it's going, but I look at the jockey. To me, I can relate to the jockey. I know at the very least, that person's going to go down with the ship fully, or they're going to be successful. And I love that. If I can invest in that kind of person, that's the best.
Would you rather that person know their strengths more or their weaknesses more?
Good question, but I can answer that quick. Know your weaknesses. You'll figure out your strength. Know your weaknesses more. Be a little humble. Let people know what you're not good at.
Yeah.
I've said that multiple times. It's really worked for me. Right. Let people know what I'm not good at. I don't need people to let them figure out what my strengths are.
Yeah.
They will.
Right.
But cream always rises to the top.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Let people know what you're not good at. I've made mistakes in hiring people where they've actually said they're good at something, and never asking the question what they're not good at. Now I interview people and ask them what they're not good at.
Right.
And hire them.
Interesting.